Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something that has absolutely tested the limits of human resilience, the unprecedented April and May 2026 heatwave in India. We're going to take a calm, factual look at exactly what went down, the atmospheric physics driving these extreme temperatures, and, most importantly, what it actually takes to survive them. Here's a quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the 2026 crisis itself, then unpack the atmospheric drivers, look at the geographical amplifiers, examine the human impact, discuss survival strategies, and finally, wrap up with the future outlook. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this crisis, we have to look at the numbers. 47.4 degrees Celsius. That is the stark, record-breaking temperature recorded in Banda, Uttar Pradesh, on April 25th, 2026. And what makes this so incredibly alarming isn't just the sheer heat, right? It's the timing. This level of extreme temperature hit 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the historical timeline. It signaled an incredibly severe, early onset of a crisis that eventually swept across 23 Indian states. But you might be wondering, what exactly qualifies as a heat wave in the first place? Well, the India Meteorological Department, the IMD, doesn't just pick an arbitrary hot number. For the plains, they look for a baseline of at least 40 degrees Celsius, but it has to be paired with a departure of 4.5 to 6.4 degrees above the seasonal normal, and that has to last for at least 2 consecutive days. It's a precise relative definition, and honestly, it's brilliant because it accounts for local context. 42 degrees might trigger an absolute emergency in a city like Lucknow, but be considered fairly normal historical weather in Bikaner. This ensures that public warnings are based on conditions that are genuinely anomalous and dangerous for local populations. All right, moving on to Section 2, Atmospheric Drivers. This is all about understanding the why. At the very core of this crisis is a phenomenon known as a heat dome. Meteorologists confirmed that this specific high-pressure mechanism basically anchored itself right over the Indo-Gangetic Plains in April 2026. Imagine the upper atmosphere's jet stream curving and essentially clamping a giant, invisible lid over the entire region. It traps a column of hot, high-pressure air, just completely preventing it from moving along or dissipating. So how does a high-pressure system actually heat the Earth up so much? It's basically a vicious cycle of physical compression. First, air subsides or sinks from high altitudes. As it drops down, the higher atmospheric pressure compresses it, and this compression mechanically heats the air, warming it by nearly 10 degrees Celsius for every 1,000 meters it falls. It's a lot like how a bicycle pump gets hot in your hands when you're compressing air into a tire. This descending heavy air entirely suppresses cloud formation, and with zero clouds in the sky, solar radiation just strikes the dry ground directly and unimpeded, all day long. Adding fuel to this stagnant heat dome are 2 critical wind factors. First up, the Lu. This is a harsh, incredibly dry wind blowing in from the northwest that can reach up to 48 degrees Celsius. And at the exact same time, the region essentially lost its natural defense system. Usually, weather systems called western disturbances roll through and bring periodic spring cloud cover and cooling. But in 2026, those systems significantly weakened. That left central and northern India entirely exposed to uninterrupted, relentless solar heating. Now, you've probably heard the term El Niño thrown around in the news. During the start of this, the El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, was actually neutral, but forecasting agencies warned it was expected to shift into El Niño by May to July of 2026. So, to be perfectly precise here, El Niño didn't directly cause the April heat. However, this developing transition served as a powerful background amplifier. It was expected to weaken the moisture-carrying monsoon winds and just prolong these dry, scorching conditions. This brings us to a really crucial point, understanding the difference between natural variability and human-driven climate change. Look, India has always had hot summers. Natural weather systems constantly cause yearly fluctuations. But human-driven greenhouse gas emissions have raised the overall baseline temperature. The 2026 heat wave is what we call a compound event. Global warming didn't just magically create the heat dome out of thin air, but it absolutely raised the ceiling of peak temperatures and extended the duration of the episode, making it far, far more dangerous. Let's jump into Section 3, Geographical Amplifiers, basically understanding the where. Our cities are, for all intents and purposes, acting like massive thermal batteries. Concrete and asphalt soak up huge amounts of solar radiation, and a lack of trees means we get zero natural evaporative cooling. Throw in all the waste heat being pumped out by millions of air conditioners, and our cities end up being 2 to 5 degrees hotter than the surrounding rural areas. In April 2026, Delhi recorded 42.8 degrees Celsius, trapping that heat in this urban canyon effect that just failed to properly cool down, even in the middle of the night. And geography really dictates the specific type of danger you face across India. In the north, the primary risk is extreme, absolute temperatures driven by those dry Lu winds. Central India, on the other hand, suffers from rapid soil drying because it's so far from any coastal relief. But then consider eastern and coastal states like Odisha and Bihar. Here, the actual thermometer temperatures might be numerically lower, but the high humidity absolutely spikes the heat index. It stops human sweat from evaporating, creating these deadly, suffocating conditions where your body just can't cool off. That leads us right into Section 4, Human and Social Impact. Understanding the WHO. Over 10,000. That is the number of people who tragically lost their lives to heat waves in India between the years 2000 and 20, according to IMD data. And the sobering reality is, experts widely acknowledge this figure is a massive undercount. Heat-related deaths are very often attributed to other underlying health causes in official records, masking the true toll. So what actually happens to us? When the ambient temperature rises too high, the human body's built-in cooling system, sweating and pumping more blood to the skin, just begins to fail under the extreme strain. And it happens on a spectrum. It starts with heat cramps, these painful muscle spasms from losing too much salt. Then it escalates to heat exhaustion, where you see heavy sweating, a weak pulse, and confusion. This leads into severe dehydration, which puts immense stress on your cardiovascular system. The absolute peak of this is heat stroke. That's when the core body temperature crosses 40 degrees Celsius. At that point, the central nervous system starts to dysfunction. Organ failure begins, and immediate emergency medical intervention is quite literally the only thing standing between life and death. And the harsh truth is, this extreme heat doesn't impact society evenly at all. The most vulnerable populations absolutely bear the brunt. Outdoor laborers, like construction workers and farmers, are losing critical working hours. In fact, the UN projected we'd hit nearly 6% of daily working hours lost by 2030 due to heat. Children sitting in unventilated schools face severe dehydration risks. Isolated elderly individuals often lack the cardiovascular reserves to cope with the stress. And the urban poor, living in densely packed, uncooled housing, face indoor temperatures that can actually get higher than the heat outside. Section 5, Surviving the Heat. Let's talk about precautionary measures. First up, we need to debunk a really surprising myth. You've probably heard people say that drinking cold water during a heat wave shocks your system. Well, it turns out that's completely false. Cold water is actually highly effective and entirely safe for hydration, and it's a great tool for preventing severe dehydration. Here's another piece of viral misinformation that's actually incredibly dangerous. The idea that a temporary drop in temperature at night means the heat wave is over. The reality is far more severe. Elevated night temperatures are a huge, continuous public health threat because they prevent your body from recovering from the daytime heat stress. The IMD strictly warns that heat waves simply resume the next day if those maximum daytime criteria are met again. So what can we actually do? Well, here are some highly actionable, low-cost things you can do at home to drastically reduce the risks. Drink 8 to 10 glasses of water daily, and definitely add oral rehydration solution if you're working outdoors. Avoid all outdoor activity between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's when solar radiation is at its peak. Inside your house, block any west or south-facing windows with thick curtains. Here's a great trick. Hang wet towels near your fans for a highly effective, low-cost evaporative cooling effect. And most importantly, if someone stops sweating and starts showing signs of confusion, those early markers of heat stroke, cool them down rapidly with wet cloths and call for emergency help immediately. Beyond what we can do at home, we also know that organized government intervention absolutely works. Just look at the Ahmedabad model. After a really tragic heat wave in 2010 resulted in over 1,000 excess deaths, the city launched India's very first heat action plan. By rolling out targeted early warning systems, color-coded alerts, and setting up community cooling centers, they managed to reduce subsequent heat mortality by over 40%. It's clear, undeniable proof that targeted structural adaptation saves lives. And finally, Section 6, the future outlook. Moving forward, we really need a twofold approach: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is basically stopping the climate baseline from getting any worse, so transitioning away from coal to renewables and protecting our forests to reduce long-term warming. Adaptation, on the other hand, means surviving the heat that is already locked in right now. We have to scale those heat action plans to rural areas, expand urban tree cover, and build cool roofs to save lives today. The science is pretty unequivocal on this. The frequency and intensity of events like the 2026 heat wave are only going to increase. Which leaves us with a really critical question to chew on. As severe heat waves become our new normal, are our cities, our institutions, and our daily habits genuinely prepared to survive the summers of the future? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, stay cool, and stay safe out there.